Hello. So I was in the shower, you see, my hair's still wet, and I was thinking about the video which I was going to be making with regard to the Dominic Cummings incident. And I suddenly got this thought, which I just had to, sort of towel on, work shirt just happened to be top of the pile of in the cupboard, and threw this on and then came upstairs because I wanted to get this out as quickly as possible. And it's because I just had this thought: a shower is a wonderful place to contemplate the world. Now, you see, okay, what's going on is this. For those of you who haven't been, who aren't in this country and haven't been keeping up with the scandal, Dominic Cummings is Boris Johnson's most trusted and powerful advisor. Boris Johnson was, a few weeks ago, it was a Friday, Boris Johnson was ill. He was going into hospital. And then Dominic Cummings realised his wife was ill. And he expected that he would be ill too. Nearly everyone around him had been coming round with the virus. So he decided on a course of action without telling Johnson. I don't think he did. I don't think he wanted to involve him in this. He said at the time he just didn't want to bother him because he knew he was already ill and he had other things to think of. Dominic Cummings packed his family into his car and drove to Durham, which is 270 miles away, so that they could stay on his parents' farm. This came out in the Q&A he conducted yesterday as I'm making this video. That is, I'm making this video on Tuesday morning, and he gave this question and answer session on the Monday. Now, what happened? His parents have a farm. He has more family in another house on the same farm, and there's this cottage on the farm, and that's where he went. He did not meet his parents. He did not interact with anybody. He did not stop the car on the way up to Durham. And then he spent the next 2 weeks in isolation in that cottage. But the reason he went there was his nieces, who are in their teens, and one's 20, one's 17, could look after their autistic child if both he and his wife had become incapacitated or indeed even hospitalized, on the grounds that they would be the least affected statistically. They were the least to be in trouble from if they got the virus from the child. Now, the day after he arrived in the cottage, he became very ill. And his wife was already very ill, but she was recovering. And so there was no need to have the child looked after by somebody else. Now, he said, and quite reasonably, if I'd stayed in London, then, and we'd both become incapacitated, then somebody would have had to take care of the child. And so there would have been a chance of the disease spreading elsewhere. And I suppose at the back of his mind was also the fact that the little boy would have to be taken away into the care of strangers, and being an autistic child, that in itself was going to pose some serious difficulties for this little boy. In my opinion, it was a dangerous thing for him to do because his wife was ill, and he knew, although she hadn't been tested, that it was probably COVID-19. And if they'd had an accident on the way up, then any rescuers would have been immediately exposed. And that was a serious danger. On the other hand, there was he's used to taking calculated risks. He took that risk and he got there and nothing did happen. And the interview afterwards, he made his explanation, and then various reporters came up one after the other. They just kept asking the same questions. It was a disgraceful example of non-journalism, and one or two of them asked, look, there are many people who are locked down in smelly flats or bad situations, or single mums who couldn't do anything, and you had a father and mother who had a place where you could stay. Don't you feel that's bad? Well, no. You do as much as you can do, and that's what he said. I did as much as I could do in my feeling that this would minimize the danger to everybody. That was his decision. It did have its problems. On the other hand, I could see the rationale, and I could understand why a man who's a responsible father would take that sort of a risk to protect his family, especially to protect a child that doesn't understand the world that well. That's another thing. But what occurred to me while I was taking my shower was this, and some of you Americans will already have jumped to that, will already have thought of that. Why didn't he just pick up the phone and call the Secret Service and get an escort up to Durham, or indeed the whole family into a private hospital? He didn't. It didn't seem to occur to him. And it didn't occur to him because it wouldn't happen here. There were people who were bitching about Boris Johnson getting into hospital, and they were saying, oh, he's probably getting better treatment than other people in other hospitals elsewhere. Well, maybe he wasn't, maybe he wasn't, but as this was a Twitter thing, and one of the Twitter answerers said, he's running the bloody country, you idiot, But that's what Dominic Cummings is doing as well. He's not an elected official, but he is a government advisor. And yet it didn't occur to him as a possibility to get the police to help him, to take him where he needed to go, or to put him in a private hospital, or to bring in some sort of a government nurse who would look after their little boy while they were both ill in their home in London. None of that, because Cummings was a citizen and didn't expect that sort of level of special treatment in America or any other country I can think of. Think of France and Russia or China or any of these so-called egalitarian countries. There would have been more government support. In fact, support is hardly the word I'd use. There would have been a complete government package to look after him and his family. But because this is England, and you know what? Britain, okay. Because this is Britain, people in the government, they don't think of themselves in that way. And it has its disadvantages. I remember my father telling me about a time when the Labour Party was in office, and one of the ministers was he needed some surgery. He needed to be in hospital for some reason, and because of the Labour Party, he had to be in an ordinary ward with ordinary people. Well, what happened was government officials were traipsing in and out all the time for meetings and papers to be signed and everything, and the police were on the door, and the patients in the ward complained, and in the end he had to be moved to a private area of the hospital, his own private room. And my father said, this is totally ridiculous. Stop pretending you're one of the guys. He needed to be in a private area. And the same thing is in reverse, if you like, is happening here. This is a so-called elitist government, and the top government advisor drove himself to his father's farm to live in he said it was like a breeze block hut on his father's farm, because he was going to be ill and he couldn't think of anybody to look after him. Okay, well, that's all. I do want to do a more critical analysis of the whole situation, but I did want to get this out. All right. If you want to donate or contact, the information will be rolling over the Graniopteryx as I speak. Please like, subscribe and share because it does help with the algorithm. If you visit my channel on YouTube and one day discover that I've disappeared without warning, you'll still find me on BitChute or Minds. Just go to either of those platforms and do a search for Graniopteryx. If you're already watching this on BitChute or Minds, good for you. Meanwhile, if you're watching this on YouTube, remember that you must keep checking the subscribe and bell icons because occasionally they reset. Till next time.